YouTube, it's Brian Phillips here, back with part 2 of the spoilers. Where we last left off, we were just getting ready to cut this to get a nice square edge so we could cut our right side outboard 6 sections for the Airbus A380 here. So we're going to pick up where we left off. Just using your run-of-the-mill office cutter to get a nice straight edge. I think I'm probably going to keep this end here. And I'm just trying to get the little imperfections off of here. Don't let your wife catch you using her cutter for this. She'll get mad. So don't tell her. It's kind of hard to use this because I can't butt it up against there with all this other crap on here. It does cut it just fine. As you can see, we got a much straighter edge, but it's still not quite perfect. And I want this edge to be pretty well perfect. So I'll just take and run the blade like this and then push it up against there to get it the last little bit so I can square it up there. As you can see, this is a super high quality tool. Some of my tools are better than others. This would not be one of the higher quality tools. Okay, got a little bit of roughness there still. Okay. That seems good. So now we can just take this back over to the bench. Want the satin side up, which is the side that we sanded. I'm going to just lay this down here. It doesn't matter which side we align to the edge, but we'll actually just use the tape that was there before. And I'm just kind of, as we move down, we'll just kind of position it so it's right there on the edge. And incidentally, I actually trust the straight edge here better than my straight edge that I made on there, on my jig or my template. But at any rate, I just want to make sure I have a good clean edge. So now we cut. Overcutting past where I want it to be. Remember, we have to make 2 of these, so you want to try to make it so you can duplicate this very closely. And so for that reason, I'm going to go ahead and just make the marks like this by just swiping over my absence of paper. We just need to transfer enough so that we can try to make them even. Stay off. I was up, got a little piece of plastic here, so watch out for bumps like that. Okay, so now this is already cut, so we don't need to worry about it. Obviously, I don't want to cut through the tape and have it dislodge as we're doing this, so I'll have to retape it after I get my initial cuts made. It's really hard to get started over there, so I'll start over here. Setting the blade up against the paper to really get it close, okay? So I'm going to do something I didn't plan on originally, but I'm going to cut it from both sides. So now I need to retape so it doesn't slip a lot. So I'll just retape it essentially right over where it had been, but the cut's made. Okay, same thing over here. That looks like it's gonna end up in my hand, so I'm just gonna throw it away right now. Okay, so I'm buttoning that up. It's easier to cut this way because I can use the face of the blade to align with my template. For a hypothetically better cut. It's always harder to do this as specific as I want it to be. This is one of those details where it will be seen to a certain degree. I mean, you're going to have to look really close to see it, but I still want to give it a really good chance at success here. Okay, so I should be cut all the way through, which I am. You know, it looks like I've just got this one little tail to kind of taper back to the main cut. Okay, so we've got somewhat imperfect top here, and then what we can do is we'll just peel this excess tape off, and we'll actually just peel that off. I want to peel this off too because I'll use this for another project. This particular plastic has worked really nice. I've used it on a couple other split flaps. I can't remember which ones I had split flaps I'd installed into, which other airplanes there were. I know I did these split flaps with their balsa. I'm trying to remember which planes I used them in. I know I did some split flaps in this, but I don't know if it was that same plastic. But either way, you get the point, guys. So this is what it looks like before it's painted. It's not cut, obviously, yet. Or, excuse me, it's not cut on the panel lines. You can see we got a very good cut. I'm happy with the way that turned out. And I'm just trying to decide if it's perfect enough or if I want to go back in and just try to like sand this, or I don't know, sometimes sanding makes an improvement, and then other times sanding sort of introduces new complications. Let's put it that way. And sometimes it just doesn't do enough, so it's just frustrating. And I was toying with the concept of maybe taking off a little bit of the material to make a smoother transition at the tip where it's going to pivot. But I'm still not 100% certain I want to do that at all. So now the other thing is, when we get ready to cut these, on my original design on the Airbus, I actually have gaps here, you see. But my original design was just to have an absence of paint in those positions, so that it looked like it was different panels. But if you watch the deployment of the spoilers on an Airbus A380, they are more or less symmetrical. They come up mostly at the same time. Some of the airliners, they come up kind of in weird patterns because they usually alternate the hydraulic systems that's running the panels. So like, for instance, if they have 3 hydraulic systems, they have the primary and then the backup and then the second backup, which they really aren't backups. They just run, you know, flight controls. But they'll have redundancy in that, like if these are run by one system, then these ones are run by another system, and so on and so forth. Now, I don't know all the specifics on this airplane because I haven't gone into that much detail, but this is going to be good enough for what we're doing. I really like the way it looks. I think I'm okay with the little imperfection there. I think it's minimal enough. It's not going to be noticed. If there was a way to really get it planed down, I would do it, but I just don't think I'm going to get any better than that. Okay, so now that you see this piece, you remember me saying we're going to cut both of the biggest pieces. So now what I'm going to do on this is I'm actually going to put a piece of tape, and I'm going to mark it so that I remember which way. I anticipate this being the right wing. Now, that doesn't mean it has to be the right wing, but it's going to get confusing. It's going to get confusing as these get done. Now, you could lay them on the plane, but of course you'll probably end up knocking them off or something stupid like that. So just mark it, do yourself a favor, mark it, and then make your second piece. I'm going to pause it, and we'll come right back when we get the second one done, and then we can jump onto the inboard portions. Okay, so we got both of these cut now, and you can see that they're mirror images, at least as it pertains to the textured part. So one thing I was thinking about was the placement of these is going to matter, and so I need to come up with a reference, or at least a method to reference the exact location so that they agree on the wing. So even though we run a small risk of having this tape peel off the clear coat and thus the silver and everything, we're going to either have to put a pin or something in there, or come up with a good quality reference point. So maybe the reference point needs to just consist of putting this down right now temporarily until we get the inside cuts done. So we want to just make sure we don't have much contact area. So you can see we've got that held down now. I want to do two pieces like that. My hope is that we won't lose the position at all, and then we'll be able to get this cut, stick it back in place, and we can make our tests and things like that. Okay, so when this deploys, it's going to go up something like that. Okay, except see how it's pulling away there? See how it's pulling away from the wing? That's one thing I was concerned about, but that should be alleviated when we cut these seams. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see. And you don't want to depend on measuring against one of these decals, because these decals are not perfectly placed. So the panel lines are actually a pretty good reference point, I believe, because they're molded into the foam as the assembly goes together. So now what we have to do is we have to basically, we never did mark that this is the left, but marking one should be satisfactory. So there you go, there's your other one. And we just have the faint marks, so we can line those up when we're ready. And you see that should come out to about the same spot. See, we're just shy of covering up this panel line here in the flap. And then we've got just a little bit of difference in overlap there. Just has to do with the way the flap is seated here, I think. So we'll be fine on that. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and start the process of moving this, but we may need to mark this somehow too for its position as well. So while we've still got this piece in place, let's take and make a corner locator. This is going to tell us exactly where the corner is, and then we can go to this other point there that's definitive. So when we have two definitive points, then we can get the location nearly exactly. Okay, so we're going to have to cut this at a weird angle so we avoid the silver. You guys get the idea though. Okay, so there's our other corner. Okay, and that doesn't need to have a lot of contact area, it just needs to be more or less in place there, because it's not going to stop anything while we're moving or anything like that. Okay, so this silver came off super easy, so we'll want to be really, really, really careful when we do this one. See how it's just wanting to pull up that crappy decal? Whew, that's just amazingly weak. Then this little part that got peeled up here, I don't know what we're going to do about that, if we're going to do anything at all. Okay, so now we need to go ahead and make this on our plastic just like we did the longer piece. Now this piece can be set aside, and obviously you want to use kind of like the smallest piece so you can get the most out of your plastic. If you like the way it works, you'll probably use it on other projects too, of course. So want to take this back out, and we'll trim this edge so we have a nice square starting point. Whichever side looks better, we use that as our reference up against the guard. Then we'll just trim to wherever we can get a square cut. And we need to just evaluate that. That seems pretty good. Then we can come up here and do the same thing. Just like that. Okay, cool. So you got a nice couple square cuts there. Let's just hope we didn't shorten it so much that we can't fit it now. It looks like we're, almost exactly as wide as we need, because I'm going to go straight to the corner here. I'm going to just make sure this tape pushes that down. This tape pushes that down. Okay. And then what I did on my last one worked really nice. I'm going to take and mark this. And then when I'm done cutting, I've got a third reference point beyond where this tape is. It's a lot easier to cut from this side with right-handed scissors because this flat plane goes up along the paper, and then this plane that would oppose the paper is underneath, guarded by the plastic. It's like over here, it'd be better to cut from this direction. I hope that makes sense to you guys at home, what I'm trying to explain there. It is totally true, by the way. Okay, so I'm going to cut right to the edge. Now normally, I would say you need to make some preparation so it doesn't slip, but it's going to probably slip because you have to cut all the way across. But if you get lucky and it just stays put like mine did, then you can just get up in here and just cut straight to the corner. Okay? So then your piece will pop out. And you can kind of tell which side it's marked, the black marking is on, because it'll rub off when you go to sand it. Alright, so you can sand right on top of this marking too. It'll come off partially, but that's fine. It's enough to give you your reference point. Ouch. Plywood splinter came up on me. Ooh, that's some tape, guys. I hadn't noticed that before. Might have been part of the original product that was in there, the kids' store, whatever it is. See, it's not want to come off, so I'll show you what I did the first time. Now, because this next step is going to take our marking off, we just want to be careful. This is really subtle angles, but if you get this wrong, it'll look really dumb, I guarantee it. So I have recommended this stuff in the past. It's an acetone that's used for taking nail polish off. And I like using this stuff to take CA off my fingers. But it'll take marker off of stuff and all sorts of cool things. But I'm going to buff this. See, it took off our transfer line, that black line there. This will eat the plastic a little bit, but it's kind of cool because it'll take the sharp edges off of the sides as well. And then you can see it's kind of, it'll eventually get that tape off of there, that tape residue, or whatever it is, the glue residue. Yep, so it's breaking it down to where I can just wipe it off now. Just kind of go in some circles. And it's kind of nice when you use stuff like that. I mean, you still don't want to sit there and drink this stuff, but at least you can get it on your fingers with the understanding that it's kind of designed to be in human contact. So that's a little bit comforting compared to some acetones where, you know, they would insist on gloves and this and that. I suppose you're probably supposed to minimize the contact with your skin because a certain amount of this gets absorbed. But it is designed for like nail polish removal. So they kind of have to figure you're going to get a little bit on yourself. And it's good for cleaning up when you spill on your table too. Okay, so we've got, I would say, about 99% of that. So now it's just a matter of, ooh, I dropped it. That's what I didn't want to do. Because the reference points are very subtle on this. See, I've got it upside down and it's so hard to tell. Nope. Nope. Yep. See how subtle that was, guys? Okay, so now we'll come back in and just finish our sanding. Okay, there we go. Now we'll go ahead and transpose our marks again. And this reference mark will actually transpose easy enough with this simpler smaller piece without having to tape it back down. I had to tape mine back down on this one. Okay, so now we can come right into where that gauge is. Not gauge, but our corner position. And you can kind of just tentatively hold that down and make sure that it looks right. That's going to be really cool, guys. Okay, so I'm going to pause it while I get the other one done. It's the same process, just opposite. But before we do that, let's go ahead and do our mark. So we want to know that this is the right wing and this is the front. So there's your R in the front. So then you'll be able to get everything back to where it belongs. Then of course over on this side we haven't actually positionally located at any time any of it. So that's where you hope everything lines up properly, because you're gonna have to figure it out. But that looks pretty cool. It's gonna look really cool when it's painted. And I'll show you that process too, guys. I'm not gonna leave you high and dry on any of this. However, in terms of the hinging and stuff, it might make better sense to paint it once the hinging's installed. I haven't 100% made up my mind if I'm gonna actually use any of these expensive hinges that I bought. I mean, none of these will be used, but it'd probably be these if I'm going to use a hinge at all. And the rationale behind using a hinge rather than tape is that if there is ever a problem, the tape comes off, it takes the whole surface of the wing off, because you're going to want a really big swath of it. You don't want it to come off on you. Secondly, this clear coat comes off fairly easy, so you could conceivably have that rip off because there's not enough holding it. So I guess between you and me, since we have the plotter and we could print a silver piece, or we could mask it and paint it, might be worth just using the tape. Tape is always a good idea as long as it's going to be sturdy enough. So without further adu, we're going to pause it and we'll come back. We'll have this one done and we'll move on to the next step. Alright guys, so we've got the panels here taped down in position. And now it just becomes a matter of trying to make sure that we have them positioned evenly, because you can create all sorts of negative things if these are positionally wrong. Okay? So I'm going to show you why calipers don't work well for this. First of all, the dihedral on the wing makes it really hard to shoot the calipers into the certain spots. Like right here, you can measure to the edge of the molded corner here. Okay, so we got a measurement there. So do what you can with calipers. So that corner is a good point. But then just a plain old string, I have a knot tied in mine, so I have a point of reference. I'm going to go from this molding to the top. Okay, so I've held it tight so it's not going to move. So we've got the same measurement there. Now let's go from the inside edge of this, just allow it to slip through your fingers, then use that knot. Okay, so that's to the inside of the plywood there. Kind of slipped on me there that time. You can also take a piece of tape and do this. Okay, so the piece of tape, you just kind of double this up a little bit, like this. Okay, and then you just pull that over. So that's to the inside edge, the outside edge of the plywood, to the top corner. Okay, so you can see we got a good measurement there. Now let's go to the inside saddle here. So we need to slide this tape down just a little bit. So we'll just slide that through. Gosh, it won't slide through very easy. Okay, so we slid that through. Okay, so that's going to be this measurement. See this one, how there's a little bit of a difference? I'm not sure how that can be because everything else seems so similar. I think this would need to go up just a little bit to agree. But then again, it's one of these where, am I going to trust the decal, which could be applied dissimilarly, or am I going to trust the molding, which is almost certainly exactly correct, or very, very close to exact. Probably the most exact part of this whole modeling process. So this, we're going to resample from here to here. That's perfect. So this is on top of the edge there. We're very close. Our tolerances are tight. Now, I'm not going to even bother to measure here because I know there's going to be a slight difference here because I did those cuts. But we could go up here to the where the nacelle is. So we're going to take this knot and go straight up here to the center of the nacelle. And I'm just going to stick it with my fingernail, okay? Then I'm going to set it in there. You see that, guys? So that's the way you can use just this piece of string to get a validation on the positional location. It's really hard to measure some of these things because you can't use a tape measure because you've got, you know, the front hook. So that gets in the way all the time. And of course it's got this fold to it. You could use a measuring strip or whatever they call the measuring ribbon. You can use a measuring ribbon. And I know that seamstress use those. And that way you could lay it down and kind of make some measurements. But now that we have this located where it needs to be, we either need to go ahead and make a somewhat permanent mark, or we just need to tape it down. Now, taping it down I think would be hugely premature because, of course, we'll have to paint this, and I don't want to mask the whole plane just to paint these things. So I'm thinking probably the next easiest thing would be to put a pin in it. And I know you guys are probably thinking to yourself, really, you're going to put pins in there? Yes, I'm going to do that. So give me a second, I'm going to get some pins picked out, and then we'll come right back to you. Alright guys, so I got these little pins that you would use to assemble a balsa wood model. And so obviously I'm going to make sure that they're clean, so there's no glue that's going to make the pin any wider than it has to be. And I'm just going to go and pin straight into the position of our marks. And yes, I recognize that this is has potential to compromise the finish, but so does getting this in the wrong spot when I go to put it back together. And I just don't think there's a really great way of doing it. So I'm going to go ahead and do it this way. Okay? So that's all there is to it. It's very simple. You're going to mark 3 known points. And then you have your positions to come back to. Okay? Very simple, effective. And then those 3 known points can be filled with CA or something of the sort. This also gives you a chance to realize if you've got any positional issues, like I just noticed now, because this fell off. See that? See how big of a deal that makes? When that thing comes off, that's kind of a big deal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and reattach this. And then I have to remeasure my positions with the hope that it stays put. So I'm going to ballpark it and we'll come right back. But you know how to do it now. So that's probably going to be the end of this video, guys. The next video is going to be getting the hinging done, I think. But you'll just have to wait and see. It's going to be awesome no matter what we do. Thanks for watching. I think I might give you guys a second part on part 2. I think I might do it just because I feel like it. Stay tuned for more, guys. YouTube, it's Brian Phillips here. Continuing part 2 of the spoilers on the Airbus A380 here. Just got the positional marks made so we can relocate these when we're ready. I think I was talking about hinging these next, but come to realize that if I'm going to use tape to hinge these, I pretty much have to have these things painted and ready to go before I can even think about that. Which is why I've decided that the next step is going to probably be more along the lines of getting the cuts made on this. Okay, so I want to cut a certain depth, right? And I want them to all be consistent. And so in order to do that, I'm going to do a little trick here, where I grab a piece of tape. I'm going to figure out approximately the depth of my cut. I'm going to mark my scissors, just like this. Super easy, easy peasy. Of course, I just screwed that up really bad. See if that depth is probably not quite enough. That might be a little more sufficient. Sufficient. Maybe just a touch more. Okay, so let's call that good. Go through, cut it, bring your scissors back together. We'll just do the one side, that's good enough. Okay, so there's our depth. We have a depth gauge, guys. So, first step. Cut to the gauge. Cut down. Stop just shy of the end of the blade. Because if you cut this stuff too sharp, you'll end up with cracks. So you got to be a little bit careful the way you do this. You can also do this with a hot blade. A little bit safer than... See, like I went all the way down to the end, and it's going to probably have a tendency wanting to split the plastic if you do that. So just be aware of that. Try to avoid it if you can. It's kind of thick stuff, so it's certainly not something I'd want to do with an X-Acto knife. Okay. We'll basically just do this all the way up and down. That time I went all the way through again. I just know the way this plastic behaves. And if you're concerned, you can actually warm up the plastic and make it a little bit more supple. Probably dip it in hot water. Don't make it boiling water. It'll probably curl on you if you do that. Alright, so now, one more cut. Whoops. Okay, so now that we've got those couple spots where we had that little splitting, get your torch, heat up your knife. Wherever you split it, just give it a little melt. This blade is getting bent from all the heating and cooling. I should probably just rotate a new blade in, but I just can't do that. It's too cheap. Okay. Alright, so now we can just visually inspect. Make sure we don't have anything too crazy in terms of splitting going on. If there would be splitting really bad here, you would want to abandon this piece and start again. Which would not be very cool, but such is life in the big city. Okay, so then you can take all those plugs and throw them away so you don't have a bump that screws you up on the next one. And then this one's technically ready to paint. So speaking of painting, when we paint these, white would be the customary color on the top, and I think it's going to be white on the bottom as well, just because that way we only have to paint the one side. But it does look like the underside tends to be like this gray color, but I think it's only gray color because of the way that it's shadowed. So like if you look at this, this is gray looking, but it's actually white. And this has got the same hue to it. So some guys will paint like a green or silver or something like that on the inside of a control surface like this, which is kind of a cool detail. But it wouldn't be scale in this case. So I'm going to go ahead and paint them white. Now, if these are as symmetrical as I believe that they are, it shouldn't matter which side's which, so long as we keep them, you know, together. So maybe what I'll plan on doing is just taking off this label and painting them, and then we'll see how it looks on the top and the bottom when we're all done. And if this clear finish makes the finish look better, then maybe we can go that route. And it might look really nice. And then we can just slide this over here, and then the other side opposite, of course. But we'll see how it turns out. Next step is getting the paint booth set up. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to pause it so I can get that stuff done. Alright guys, so we got this Rust-Oleum Painter's Touch Ultra Cover 2x primer. Works really good. I like it a lot. It's also a flat white finish because we're painting the bottom of this plastic, hopefully so we can flip it over and use the other side. If it doesn't give us the finish we're looking for, I'll stick to the direction I was planning on, and I'll use like a gloss primer, or not gloss primer, gloss finish, or I don't know. We'll figure it out. One way or another, just wanted to give you guys a shot at this. I got my heater going. I've got a fan that pulls air away. Then I have an exhaust vent that goes up, and it pulls the air out through a 90 CFM fan up in the ceiling here that shoots it straight out of the building. And I can pull this out and stick that in there, and it fits perfect. It's really cool. I can actually move that throughout the shop, but the airplanes have sort of screwed that up a little bit. So without further ado, usually when I'm spraying, I turn off this just so it doesn't cause problems. Get the paint going. I put these up on pieces of wood here so that it would help to kind of spread out this opening here, because I want to get that inside seam. I pulled them apart and retaped them down. Okay, so that's about all you got to do. And of course I've got this 90 CFM fan is actually right up behind that insulation there, so it's quieter. And then I have a timer, and then I have a switch to keep it on if I want, and of course I got the regular light switch. So I can leave it on if I know I need to run it right away. I can just turn it on, or I can run that and then walk away, go to bed or whatever. And then I don't have to blow all my conditioned air out of the building. Alright, so yeah, that looks pretty good. Now I don't want to go too crazy on the paint because I don't want these things to be super heavy. But you got to keep in mind, I want them to be completely white. I don't want any gaps or anything. Okay, this is primer too, so you don't need to give it very much time. So I'm going to go ahead and do a second coat now already. Get the heat back on. And then I pull out the fire alarm so that it can sit in a different spot right outside the door. So if there's a fire, we still have a warning because there's a battery that operates it still. But it just won't set off the entire house. And then we have, just for you guys that are worried, we have a fire alarm right there too. So if there'd be an actual fire, we would have a good warning system still. It's just a little bit too sensitive when I paint with it right there. And I can kick this up to the high setting and really get some of that air moving if I want. So what I'm doing is I'm just looking for dryness, and it's amazing how quick this stuff dries if you do it this way. Like, I could probably pick that up and touch it already. And it's been like 2 minutes or so. I want to do another coat though, so I'm going to cut that off, put this back to the medium setting. Oh, and then obviously, that's the fan setting. So obviously this thing is just a big piece of wood, but, or not wood, cardboard. And I just use the table saw, I just pull it out to support everything. And then this gets pointed down so that it points at the work. And these two sides kind of keep that paint overspray from getting too crazy. But it works nice, the air quality stays really good while I'm working. And unless I'm painting something really big, it's not a big deal. And you can kind of see from this angle where we've still got a little bit of wet paint here. Or in this case, primer. But it's looking good, so probably one more coat. I can actually literally watch it dry. Right here I can see the puddle disappearing. It's so cool. Alright guys, I'm going to pause it and we'll get that last coat on there. And might come back down in like a half an hour and do another coat, or 15 minutes, or whatever this thing says to do. But it looks so close now, it may not even need much more. But you guys get the idea. There's something satisfying about watching somebody else do all this work. So I can at least appreciate this step, watching this video series. Here when we come back, see, like, let's just take a look at that real quick. Let's go check the color. Oh yeah, guys. That is going to be plenty close enough to do the job, I think. So yeah, we'll definitely get another coat on there. And then to be honest with you, that looks pretty good too. And my little remnants of the black marks are still on there, which is a little bit of a bummer. It was a bit of an oversight on my part. But at the same time, it kind of helps to highlight the seams, which is good. It's always good to highlight the scale details if you can without compromising the scale behavior. Okay, let's shut off the heat. Turn this down again. And this will be probably the last coat. I'll actually walk around for this side so I get the same symmetrical coating. Alright, cool. So that's basically all she wrote for now. We'll go ahead and run the heat. And guys, that'll probably be the end of part 2 of part 2. When you come back, there'll be some new, exciting, phenomenal action on this Airbus A380. What a beauty, guys. What a beauty. Really appreciate you being a part of this. Check the description below. There's a bunch of links to different items like the receiver, different stabilizers I've used, CA, you know, all the normal stuff that you guys buy when you're building stuff like this. I might even put a link to this paint. If you buy it from those links, you help support our partners and our channel, which helps to fund this extravaganza of RC excitement. So we appreciate you doing it if you can, and if not, give us a thumbs up anyway. We really appreciate it. Come back, watch some more. It's great to have an audience that's this loyal. So we really appreciate you guys. Alright, signing out for now.